Welcome back to another episode of Next Step In. I'm your host, Joe Glover, and my co host, Eddie Bobbitt, will be joining us soon. Today, we've got a conversation that's all about making education beyond high school more accessible and less stressful, financially and mentally, for families and students. Joining us today for this episode is Bill Wozniak, a longtime education funding advocate and senior executive at InvestEd, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping Hoosiers understand and navigate the financial aid landscape so that they can pursue post secondary goals with the least amount of debt possible. Bill leads the organization's outreach and financial aid literacy efforts across Indiana, helping students, families, and counselors make informed decisions about paying for college, filling out the FAFSA, and finding the best financial pathways to success. In today's episode, we'll dive into the realities of student financial planning, how to make sense of financial aid options, strategies to avoid unnecessary debt, and much more. So, whether you're a student, a parent, an educator, or simply curious about the financial side of higher education today, this conversation with Bill is packed with practical insights that you won't want to miss. So, let's take that next step together and get into it. Welcome back to the Next Step In podcast. I'm Joe Glover. Eddie Bobbitt's here, and we are joined by the one and only Bill Wozniak, who is joining us with InvestEd. And we're very excited to get to know you more today, Bill, and know more about what InvestEd does. And Eddie, thank you first. I guess I'll start it off. Why did you think Bill would be such a great guest for us?
Listen, InvestEd is a gem in the state of Indiana with the work that they do for students and families, especially when it comes to completion of the FAFSA. They collaborate with schools all over the state and do different FAFSA nights. And I've worked with them over the last 5 or 6 years. And every time we collaborate, it's a huge benefit for the families. I received so many positive comments about the interactions with the InvestEd folks and our different workshops. So it only made sense to have Bill represent his team on the #1 higher ed podcast in the state of Indiana.
Well, that's a heck of an intro, Bill. So we'll see. Well, I know he's putting the pressure on you, but why don't you start and tell us a little bit more about what InvestEd is, right? Start there and kind of what your mission is, maybe what your mission is personally too, and maybe how you've been with InvestEd, I think, for multiple years. So you might talk a little bit about how long you've been there and how your role has kind of evolved over time.
So I'll try to remember all those. This is like a memory quiz there, but I'll try to get to all of them as best I can. First of all, InvestEd came about in 1980. And it is the state's not-for-profit entity to help students get additional education beyond high school with less student loan debt. So it's about advising, it's about helping students with all those questions and all this entails. And then again, that whole loan side, okay, how do you fund it and how do you do so with the least student debt possible? And so the InvestEd's been around over 45 years now. And we work with over 300 schools across the state. We work with almost every college across the state, and we do different things with the high schools. We do different things with the colleges. We take over 10,000 calls every single year with families working one-on-one, all those different types of things, FAFSA, planning ahead, how do I pay for college, all those types of things are what keep us busy.
So talk about your mission personally. I'm just kind of curious because you've been there for several years. And so obviously you have a passion for this. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of got you down this pathway? And it sounds like it's a pretty fulfilling job from the way you describe it.
Oh, it's a dream. It's a dream. If you do what you love, you're never going to work a day in your life. And so it was January of 2003. I got to Indiana and came to this wonderful organization. And because we're a not-for-profit, there was work with the colleges, there was work with the financial aid offices, and very quickly I was asked to come to a financial aid night, which I wasn't exactly sure what it was, but I learned pretty quickly, and very quickly learned that there was really room in the space for high-quality, really top-notch presenters to be able to help families every step of the way with this. Our friends in ISFA, the Indiana Student Financial Aid Association, are incredible, but the folks at the financial aid offices are really busy full-time working in those financial aid offices. So what used to happen is they would go off to the high schools in the evening as best they could, and they would do as much as they could. But if you wanted to do events with ninth graders, 10th graders, 11th graders, seniors, FAFSA completions, FAFSA follow-ups, that type of a commitment, I mean, that's a real serious commitment from school to school to school. And that's where Invested really stepped in to try to provide this type of comprehensive programming for any school in Indiana that wanted it.
That's good stuff. So, Bill, full transparency, both Joe and I are both first generation college students. So we remember oh, you as well. Fantastic. So we remember going through the FAFSA journey back in high school. Back then, it was on paper. That dates us a little bit, but and
And
it
we
was
also couldn't pull the tax information directly over, so we had to get all
no.
the tax paperwork too. That was a fun journey. You remember those good old days?
Yeah, I remember filing the FAFSA as a junior and getting really excited and going to my counselor, like, I filled out the FAFSA. She was like, good for you, but you have to do it next year because you did it the wrong year. But so I know that you all do a lot of work with the FAFSA, and we'll get into that. But talk to us a little bit more about those who are unfamiliar with InvestEd, some of your core programs outside of the FAFSA nights. Talk a little bit more about those.
So everything started, and I'll just bounce around a little bit, and I don't think that'll be too bad. So everything began with the financial aid night, which was traditionally that event with seniors in high school. Okay, we got to get ready, not the FAFSA filing itself, because remember, it used to start January 1. So in the fall, we would be going to schools, getting the seniors and families ready for that little 10-week window where filing could occur on paper with erasers and all of that. So we would go do these events and talk to seniors and all of that. And one day we were at a school, and a counselor, all of our ideas came from counselors, all of them. And we were at a school, and a counselor said, this is great, but why don't you talk to ninth graders and 10th graders and juniors? And I was like, well, that's a good idea. And so we started what we called our early awareness series. And so the early awareness events were for anybody before senior year to do the types of things that you could plan years ahead of time, which was a much better curriculum. I mean, it really changed the game when we started doing that. So the financial aid night stayed. The early awareness events then took off. Then we layered in the FAFSA completion, because you could do all this, but you don't get the FAFSA filed, and people had a lot of questions. So you had to layer in that part. And then we added in what we call sort of finalizing financial aid or FAFSA follow-up, so that when the students get these award letters, they have an expert there to help them. Plus is a loan, it's not a grant. Okay, how do I compare this award letter with this award letter, and different options and things like that. So everything grew out of counselors saying to us, why don't you ... And then as quickly as we could after that, we layered in the programming.
It's funny how the best ideas come out of just that collaboration, having that open dialogue. It seems to be that happens in almost every career field I know of. It's just when people finally get together and start talking about the problems, it's funny how you can solve things.
I was going to say how great ideas come from high school counselors is what I
Well,
was going
well,
to say. You know,
yeah,
like,
that too. He's a little biased, but that's okay. Well, we allow it. We allow him a couple, like 2 biased moments per episode, and so this is a good one. One down, Eddie. One down. No, but Bill, when you're thinking about this, I think about, gosh, all the problems that you must have to try to solve. It sounds like you're like a professional problem solver. So when you're trying to help families go through this, what is maybe one of the issues that pop up the most that you are trying to solve for Hoosier families? Is there something that kind of rises to the top?
Yeah, we could have a top 100, but that's great. Number one has to be, I'm not going to file the FAFSA because ... That's number one. Number one, I know that filing the FAFSA is not for me because, and I cannot tell you, I'd be retired by now if I had $1 for every time a parent, a family, a student came back afterward and said, I didn't know. I didn't know. We go into a resource called College Navigator that's out there. And if you go into College Navigator and you just pick a particular school, and whatever school across the country, you pick a school, you go in there and you just look for average aid. And if you look for average aid, at whether it's the folks that earn the least or the folks that earn the most, people quickly find that there's aid on average for each of the groups, different types of aid, different types of different types of grants and scholarships. And very quickly, a family says, wait a minute, like, I make X, doesn't matter what, I make X. I was sure I wasn't going to get aid. And I said, the only way you can be sure you're not going to get aid is by not filing that FAFSA. So number one is absolutely not filing the FAFSA. And if I'm allowed one B, or the second item is I'm going to pay full price. I'm going to pay cost of attendance, sticker price. What I saw in all these posts on the web, college costs $12.6 million a semester. No matter where I go, I'm never going to get a job, and I'm not going to be able to ever pay off my student loan, is item two. And you can make a lot of mistakes. There's no doubt about it. But if you follow the steps that we teach and we coach and that we help with, in almost all cases, there's going to be a real sensible path and a real option that is not going to be end of the world type stuff.
That's amazing. And you think about it, I mean, you guys have been doing this for over 40 years for Indiana. I sit here and I think about all the lives and the families that you've helped change, and how that work has really helped people get over that hurdle. And you've helped families realize that they can get a college degree. And heck, some of those kids are probably having kids that are going to college now. And think about all that generational knowledge that we didn't all have as first generation college students, and now that they have. I mean, I can only imagine that is as much as college costs have changed and financial aid policy has changed. I imagine for you, just seeing the impact over the years has been pretty important to you.
Oh, life changing. I mean, life changing. You just said first generation. So in 2003, when I was at these first events going with a ISFA professional, and I was going and I was attending and I was sitting in the back with a notebook and 1,000 questions, and I was learning bit by bit, I immediately saw quickly that I and my family had made every single mistake you can make. I did everything wrong. And you're sitting in the back going, wow, that would have been good to know. That would have been good to know. And now, all these years later, as you work with family after family after family, the reward, and counselors get this all the time. I'll do one on top of your two. So counselors get this all the time when a family says, "Hey, you really changed my life. You really made a difference. It really helped." So at the end of the night, to see three families, four families, five families, or to get the emails that we get, and a family says, "I would not have known this. There's no way I would have known this. And you came here and the team was amazing and it's completely free and it was simple and friendly and straightforward and it's life changing." And the last thing I'll say on that is, so we'll get a phone call and someone will say, "I have a question. I want to do this. I want to know about this or that." And at the end, people will sometimes say, "So I'm going to hang up now. And it's like, "Yep." And it's like, there's no charge. We're not asking for a credit card number. There's no upsell. And people it's such a rewarding moment. They're just like, okay, well, thank you. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it kind of shows how jaded our world is. They'll be like, "Wait a minute, you help me and you don't want anything for yourself?" Yeah. So, Bill, one of the questions that I always have to address with our families is the fear almost that takes place when they start hearing EFCs, now called SAIs, COAs, SARs. Walk us through. I'm a family. I'm filing the FAFSA. Walk us through the steps of, okay, I file the FAFSA, then what, then what, then what?
Absolutely. So the acronyms, and we talk about this all the time, the acronyms are mind numbing. And it's just we really go there. We really lean into it, as you know. And the SAR, student aid report, COA, cost of attendance, FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. And when we teach our team, and you've met so many of them and know so many of them, and the comprehensive training, as we bring on a new person, they're like, "You're going to train me, right?" And I love to say, "You're going to be trained for so long. You're going to be begging us to go alone. You're going to be so excited when we say, okay, you can now go alone, because you have to be there and live it again and again, because you have to know these acronyms. You have to know these definitions." And so we go from the beginning of, okay, I have to look at these colleges. I have to look at these schools. How do I examine them? Where are the resources for these different spots? How do I compare them? What is the best way for me to compare these things? And then you get into the FSA ID, the account, right? The FSA ID, so that you have your account with federal student aid, which is your gateway into the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, which helps create the SAI, the Student Aid Index, which replaces the EFC, the Expected Family Contribution, which was a bad name. And then you need your contributors, which are not necessarily contributing even a dollar. They're contributing information so that we can then get the Student Aid Index, which can then be used with the colleges who are trying to knock down their COA, cost of attendance, down to the net price. I think we hit as many as we could in one answer.
Yeah, but it really is. And I try to simplify it for students. And I say, like, look, we're going to fill out this free application. That information is going to go to the Department of Education. They're going to spit out a number. It's called an SAI. And I don't care if you remember that. I just need you to know that that's the number, generally speaking, that the government thinks that you can pay for college. Meanwhile, colleges, universities have their mandatory COAs. That's direct and indirect cost. I explain the direct and indirect cost, the difference. And very generally speaking, we subtract those two, and that's the unmet need of the student, and that's when we start seeing what you qualify for. And usually, when I describe it like that, you see the relief. You're like, oh, okay. Because sometimes when we use all those acronyms, like people check out because of the fear of like, I don't know what this means.
100%. And this is why when I mentioned the College Navigator tool, when we have less than 7 seconds of somebody's attention, the more time you have, the more in depth you can go into. When we sometimes only have those 7 seconds, when we use the College Navigator tool, or when one of our team is on the phone with someone and we don't want to lose their attention, and we have them go right into there, pull up the school, and see in one chart the COA and the average price paid by income group. We don't have to know their income. Just quickly, they see COA of 52 and an actual net price of 27. Now, that doesn't mean 27 is easy, 27 is going to be a piece of cake, or it's even acceptable. But quickly, someone says, so on average, for my income group, I'm going to get about $25,000 of aid. And quickly, 27 versus 52 becomes what has to be attacked. And for others who have less resources, they see 15 or 20 and it goes to 0. And again, there's not a lot of resources maybe in this example at home, but the number goes to 0. And quickly, some thought, some examination can be done with that type of information for the family, and the relief that you talk about. And now you can really have a whole different conversation and move forward.
Yeah, and that's why I'm such a fan of your all's early educational series, because I think Joe would agree. Had I known that my financial situation back in 8th, 9th, 10th grade, even that the FAFSA was even a thing, because my expectations were I was going to have to go in the military in order to escape poverty. Had I known that my financial situation in that one very specific situation was actually advantageous for me, it might have changed my academic outlook and performance, because I'm like, hey, there's actually going to be aid, there's going to be support. Like college is actually an option versus, hey, I don't come from a high income group. This isn't in the cards for me.
We do a statewide survey every year to people, not attendees per se, just across the state, have an entity come in and do this across the state to find out people's views of post-secondary education overall, the concept of a not-for-profit helping and coaching. And again, off the charts, every year, the interest by families in education beyond high school, the interest in having an unbiased, not-for-profit team of experts there to help, which is not surprising to us, but we always want to check just to see that there's interest in this. And then the families want this and they want to learn. And then, of course, as you know, when we come to the school and we do the events, there's post-event surveys. Then we reach out to the counselors for surveys of the counselors again and again to just make sure we get that feedback. And overwhelmingly, the attendees say, I would have never known this. I would have never known this. I learned this. Thank you so much. Because that free, trusted entity to be able to provide those answers makes such a difference. Because when someone sees my net price is going to be 10,000, not that that's easy, but my net price is going to be 10,000, it's a whole different world than 42 or $50,000. And people need to know what that real number, within reason, within a small margin of error, what is that real number? And it really is a game changer.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And, as I sit here and listen to this, I've heard you talk about the College Navigator a couple of times. Is that your main thing that you like to get people to, as far as getting them into the system to understand more? Is that where you try to direct people to?
So we have answers and resources for everything. So College Navigator in this part of the discussion is one that I love because you can quickly, easily, without a lot of questions, show someone what are we looking at here as far as a nice ballpark for aid for any single school. Because a lot of times private schools are immediately taken off the list and just viewed as impossible. And when you look in there, you can see maybe it shouldn't be off the list. Maybe this is a lot more reasonable than I had thought. So that's one that we love. Another one that we love, looking at this other part of the paradigm, we always want to look at what is a reasonable salary? What is a reasonable sort of income to be a ballpark as we get going in all this for a particular major, right? So we like a tool, another free tool called My Next Move, mynextmove.org, a website, and the information is updated by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So every year it's updated with the current information. And this is a part when a student is saying, I'm looking at this school, I'm looking at this school, and we love all schools. We don't have any sort of a bias on that front. But then we say, okay, so with College Navigator, we can kind of get an idea about net price quickly. Let's go to My Next Move, and you're talking about this profession or this profession. And you can quickly see if you go down this path, just let's do the low hanging fruit. Let's talk about medicine or let's talk about things along those lines. Well, the gamut from different types of jobs where you could be making 15 or 20,000 up to the highest paying jobs in the world, 20-degree neurosurgeon, right? So you can go from the entire gamut and where somebody wants to be. Is it more of a nursing thing? Is it more of a CNA? Is it more of a what type of role within that ecosystem? And then that quick salary expectation can be seen along with 40 other similar jobs in that arena. And you can sort of align what type of pay, income after education with kind of the out-of-pocket debt that might need to be incurred. Not that people don't change their major or change their profession, but very quickly between mynextmove.org and College Navigator, you have two tools where students and families can quickly get an idea if this is a feasible type path that you're embarking on or something that really isn't a plan. It's more of a hope and a wish.
Man, it's so impressive just what you guys have been able to do from just from a perspective of being able to help students. Oh, there you are, Bill. You disappeared for a second. So yeah, that's it's so impressive. So one of the things we've talked about on this show a couple times is about how early decisions, things like dual credit, AP, career exploration, some of those things can play into cost management. And so, why don't you talk to us a little bit about kind of what your research is in that area? I mean, I think we know that hey, a student that can do dual credit and AP can save some money in the long run. Do you guys take that into consideration when you're talking to students about how to afford college?
We absolutely we absolutely do. We are huge fans of anything that doesn't have the time in college go beyond the 4 years, or if it's a 2-year degree, the 2 years. We want that to be as small a time frame as possible. We talk always about not filing the FAFSA is a massive, massive issue. Then it is the extra time beyond 2 years or beyond 4 years that is a real difference maker because aid is often based on 4 years for a 4-year degree. That fifth year that so many students now take could not only be extra expense, but extra expense with no aid, where the grants and scholarships that were coming in for freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year, that fifth year, you could get more student loan debt than the other years combined if you get outside that window of aid. That's why the fifth year on a 4-year degree is so devastating. And we talk about this in our early awareness. I know Eddie knows this. We talk about this in our early awareness events and our FAFSA events, our financial aid night events. Just please don't take long. So, getting back to the point about things like dual credit or things where you can get credit ahead of time, that just adds to the bucket of tools to make sure that the least amount of time possible to get the degree is within range. And even if you don't graduate earlier than you would have, but it helps you avoid extra time beyond the 2 year or 4 years, even that is really, really important.
So I'm gonna throw you a curveball here real quick. So if I'm a family and I don't know much about what's going on, but I'm watching the news because I like to stay informed, and I see all this news about the the federal government and about the what's going to happen to FAFSA, and maybe what's going to happen with student aid. What are you guys kind of telling people who are kind of getting nervous or upset or kind of just confused about what's going on in the federal higher education space? I'm sure you guys have gotten questions about this as different things are said on in the public media. So have you guys dealt with that, and kind of what are you helping people understand with that?
Since 2003, when I went to the first event, there hasn't been a year, not one, where I haven't heard the next end of the world, everything stopping. School cannot be done with less than $100,000 per semester. Everyone's going to fail. Everyone's going to default on their loans. End of the world. Now, again, I don't want to minimize the fact that people that take 6 years instead of 4, that just sit on the quad, that just roll up student loan debt, don't try to get scholarships, grants, file the FAFSA, and all of this, everything that is the opposite of what we're coaching. I'm not trying to minimize in any way that there are really bad paths on this. When we were talking about during COVID and some of the student loan repayment, and when people would call us, we were saying, hey, if at all possible, make some payments here because you can knock down the principal. And people told us, well, no matter what, it's all getting forgiven. And we just said, it might, but just be careful, plan ahead, things like that. So every single time since 2003, we had the end of the FELP program when direct loans became the only loan that could be there for the federal student aid. We had things like COVID hit and then payment pause happening. We had talk about the end of and now we have the end of the Grad Plus program. We have the changes to the Parent Plus program right now, right? And we've had all these different things going on. The on ramp time period, the forgiveness of student loans, the court rulings on student loan forgiveness not going to happen, and all these different things. The only thing that's constant is change. It happens again and again and again. And so, what we like to do is be that resource that is always there, just a phone call, just an email away. And families call us every day, all the time, saying, I just need help on this. And we don't know the news that's going to happen tomorrow. We just know that we're going to be up on it and we're going to be able to help any Hoosier with their questions. And like I said, when we talked about student loan forgiveness, when we talked about public service loan forgiveness changes, when we talked about all these different things, we're very proud of our track record. And again, Eddie, you've heard our experts talk, and just trying to keep people always in a plan for the worst, hope for the best type posture. And it's really served us well over these last many decades.
Well, I am, for one, certainly disappointed that you have not bought into the fear mongering that takes place every single year, Bill. So anyway, talk to us a little bit, because we both agree with you, right? Right now, higher ed there's this perception that it is $150,000 per credit hour, and it's just and I talk to families all the time, and they see these things and they see the headlines, and it's creating this myth that college isn't affordable. And we've had a lot of people on this show and talking about Indiana's actually, like, we have affordable institutions here.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a way to make this affordable. Now, you got to be smart about it. Like you said, you can't be just jacking up the loans and not trying to apply for scholarships. Of course, there's a process to it. Talk to us a little bit about the data as far as, are we seeing trends with Hoosiers following the FAFSA? Are they not following the FAFSA? Talk to us a little bit about the data through the years.
Oh, absolutely. And just one last point on that. The other thing that we always want to hammer home is at our events, we also have students and families that then come up to us afterwards and say, you know what? I was looking on mynextmove.org. I was doing some examination, and Mary or Johnny wants to go in this field. And it looks like a 6-month certificate program, maybe from community college. This is going to be the best path. By the same token, we don't want somebody to go to a 4-year degree or some expensive degree that doesn't match up with what their interests are in, what their strengths are in, what they want to do. And that's, again, we're always talking about alignment. We're always talking about what is best. And so we're not an advocate or a zealot for either direction or any direction. Eddie, you had mentioned the military. Again, the military, such an answer for so many people. And that's a great thing. And so what we're zealots about is the right path, really thinking it through and examining. But if someone does want a 4-year degree and what they're going into is necessary of a 4-year degree, and the family's more middle class, lower middle class, something like that, there is aid available. So we want them to know that that aid is available and what it's really going to play out like in those terms.
I mean, it's so impressive. I mean, I will sit here and say that one of the biggest things that's come to mind for me already is how much you guys are already doing, and I'm a little bit ashamed that I didn't know some of this, so that you guys were around, and shame on me for not. I will say my kids are a lot younger, so we have a few more years before we have to start thinking about college. And I know that we have excellent counselors like Eddie, who's going to let me know when my kids do get to be that age that this resource is available.
Our technical name from back at the beginning, our official name is Indiana Secondary Market for Education Loans. And so back in the 80s, there was all these community banks and entities out there that had 4 student loans here, 12 student loans here, 100 student loans here. Back in the olden days, you got your student loans at a community bank on the corner. And so we were created along with entities like us across the country to go gather those in, to compile those. And so for Indiana, we were created, for that role. And we went off and did that. And as years go along, like we talked about, the only constant is change, right? And so as you go along, and the world kept changing with student loans, with all these different needs and what was out there, we kept going along with it as well. And by the time we got towards 2003 and all this advising and coaching and training and all of that really became something that was really needed, we as a not for profit felt that was right in our mission. That was something that we should really lean into, and we should be there and be helping, like our friends at the Commission for Higher Education and our friends at ISFA, the Indiana Student Financial Aid Association. And we were out there doing those things. But it was through the loans and the buying of the loans and those types of things back in the past and secondary market type activities that we were able to do those things, offer Hoosiers a better option as far as lower cost federal student loans, and all of the steps in that is where the resources came from all these many years. But no, we don't get a funding check like that to operate. No.
Well, that's even more impressive. So I think a lot of people would say, "Well, great. So we're getting all these resources, and it's not from a tax payment standpoint." But I love it. It's really interesting. So when we talk about state programs, since we just talked about that, we've obviously got the 21st Century Scholarship Program in Indiana, and we got the O'Bannon Grant Program, the Frank O'Bannon Grant Program. Governor Frank O'Bannon was actually from our area of the state, down here in the southern part, so we're very attuned to that. But what advice do you have for how FAFSA outcomes and some of those things might affect those state eligibility programs? And then, is there any new news this year regarding those programs? Because I know that those are constantly evolving as the state legislature is in session. So, any new changes there that people should know about?
Yeah, the biggest item there with the 21st Century Scholars Program is obviously this is geared towards those with the most need. And this program, along with the Pell Grant federally, is where the colleges use the 21st Century Scholarship, the Pell Grant, and then other institutional aid sometimes to make it possible for those with the lowest income to be able to go to college. And then that O'Bannon grant program is sort of where it picks up where the 21st Century Scholar Grant might leave off. And then the O'Bannon grant steps in to make a difference for those that are a little bit higher in the income, but not high income per se. And so you have the 21st Century Scholars Grant. Federally, you have the Pell Grant. In Indiana, you have the O'Bannon Grant, you have institutional aid, and that's just sort of the tip of the iceberg. There's others as well. But you also talked about sort of that difference between, okay, what is the exact award going to be in a given year for 21st Century Scholars? What is the exact award going to be for O'Bannon Grant? And that all happens, of course, with the Commission for Higher Education, the legislature, and they go about doing that work. And what we do is we just watch off to the side what is going to happen federally with the Pell, what is going to happen with 21st Century Scholars, what's going to happen with O'Bannon. But again, all these years, those programs carry on, they move forward. There is adjustments up or down that get handled by those in Indianapolis, and they take care of all that. And what we do is we just work with the families based on what those are providing at a given time, what also the colleges are providing, other scholarships, other grants that are available to put the whole pieces together. But as you pointed out, the percentages change. This one goes up, this one goes down a bit, Pell goes up, Pell goes down. And it's all those moving parts, which is why people's head spins and they get lost. And we don't spend so much of our time in a particular presentation or working with a family on some of the intricacies. Well, this was 21.7% last year, but it's looking more like 23.1. And the poor family is shaking their head when we say, here's the deal based on what you just filed with the FAFSA, based on what we know for school A and B. Your net cost here is $11,200. Your net cost here is $7,100. What are you feeling? And then they can work with those schools and maybe they can get the 7,100 adjusted a little bit or the 11,200 adjusted a little bit. But some of the inside baseball, while the three of us can have good fun with it and understand it is a moving target, for the families, we like to make it something that they can digest, understand, and then weaponize and move forward for themselves.
It makes complete sense. And so let's talk a little bit about, now let's kind of transition a little bit to talk a little bit about borrowing, because I often think people, immediately are like, no, I'm never going to borrow, because it's a pendulum, right? It's like forever it was, whatever you can do to go to college. Then it was like, oh no, now the pendulum's kind of swung where it's like, okay, you can't have any kind of loans because then it's a horrible thing if you have loans, but it's not always that easy. And there's a lot more that goes into that. And I think that you have already kind of talked about this a little bit in the fact that it's all about that research up front, right? It's talking about, what kind of income are you going to make after you graduate with that credential and you're able to get into the workforce, because that sometimes can make the idea of investing into your education through a loan a little bit more make more sense when you start looking at the numbers and you start comparing and looking at the whole picture. So, how does Invested counsel families and students when it comes to loans and that being a part of the equation?
So we've given all this great backstory, which is sort of a perfect precursor to what I'm about to say here. So when we get to this part, it can be very, very simple. And the simple part is this. Student A says they want to do this in accounting, or they want to do this in medicine, or they want to do this in business or legal or whatever it is. And they have good grades, they're a hard worker, and they want to accomplish X. But to get that job or those jobs, they have to have a 4-year degree. At least at this point, AI will get wherever it's going to be. But the family that I'm talking to has a senior in high school and they're about to go on to college. They have an immediate problem, and I don't have a solution for them to be that lawyer or that doctor or that accountant or that business person. And they need that degree. So now we say, okay, well, the best path to that is here. And we start to look at that. And we look at, well, if you get that job that you're working towards, that job that you have a passion for, it pays about $92,000 a year on average. Good benefits, $92,000. Okay. If you just do the high school degree, or you maybe do this 2-year program for something else, it might pay $30,000 or $35,000 or whatnot. They don't have interest in that. They have interest in that job in business or whatever it is that pays 90,000. Okay. So now we go look, depending on their income. Let's take a look. What's the net price? Oh, you can go to this state school or you can go to these couple private schools. And it looks like you're looking at about $15,000 of student debt. And we're sitting with the family, we're sitting with the student, and we're like, now, this doesn't mean you're going to graduate. This doesn't mean you're going to do internships and you're going to work hard and you're going to show up for work. You might not. You might graduate school and then never show up for work. Well, the pay for that is about zero. And so it's not going to go well. So there's parts in this that have to then play out. But when you say the job that you're working towards and the major that you're working towards pays about 90,000 a year or 70,000 a year or whatever that number is versus 30, when you're talking about a $15,000 of loans amount, you can see how that could be paid back over time. And that's the first part that we really work on. What is that amount of loans? And what is going to be the average salary afterwards? And how does that compare? And then if you're going to need those loans, we want that $15,000 in loans to be in the best way possible, the lowest interest rates, the best terms, so that that doesn't become suffocating. 15,000, if it's at 17% interest, could then become a real serious problem. So how do you try to avoid that aspect of it as well? And that's kind of how we coach and teach.
That's good stuff. Bill, speaking of coaching and teaching, one of the type of families that it's always difficult to have this conversation is that middle class family where maybe they're making too much to receive the Pels and the SELGs and the Franco-Bannon grants, but they don't make quite enough to pay for school directly out of pocket. What advice would you give them maybe early on in their child's career? How do you approach those conversations?
Well, you nailed it, and you're spot on. The group at the far end on one side has a lot of grants and scholarships, but they are scared. They are scared because even though the cost of the school after grants and aid is going to be zero, they're still scared because there are very few resources there, and you understand that. And as you pointed out, on the far end, if you're making 12 million a week, well, maybe okay, you have a check and you can write a check. But those that get outside on the higher end, but maybe not 12 million a week, that group there gets nervous because they might be putting closer to 40 or 50,000 a pop per year per student, right? Actually out of pocket. And even then it doesn't feel great. But you're right, those two ends have ways to go about it. But the middle group that gets just north of the O'Bannon grant, that group right there, depending on their situation, how many students and whatnot, but that is absolutely the group. And again, that is the one that we work the most with to try to say, can we do some 529 action because you get that tax rebate from the state, a generous tax rebate from the state. And again, we always talk to everybody that we're working with, and we want to make it clear. We're not saying it's easy. We're not saying that $1,000 or $2,000 or whatnot is easy. But if you get into that middle group or upper middle group, it's possible sometimes. And so you know about the tax break for that, and then the interest on that grows tax-free. So that can really take a little of the sting out of maybe that 12 or 13 or 14,000 a year that needs to be to come up with. But you're absolutely right. That middle group is where we spend a lot of our time working with them, talking to the schools. They know the schools are well aware, seeing your SAI, that you are in that group that is north of here, but south of probably having a real nice set of coffee cans in the backyard. They know where you are, and that might be where the schools are able to step up a little bit and try to help with that. Almost always not to the point of fully taking care of it, but maybe, hey, you could do a little work study here. Maybe you could do this. And then, like we said, 529 and other options can also help, but it is really the toughest spot.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And you bring up another point here when we think about different types of loans and different types of payments and different types of things you can go through to help finance some of this. I was kind of curious because I think a lot of people don't actually understand the differences between federal loans, private loans, parent refi loans, and Can you talk briefly? I know that you could probably do a whole show on each of those, but like, can you kind of just give a brief overview about what those are, just in case that's a new concept to some of the people that are listening to this podcast?
Absolutely. So we start with the student loan, which is really the student's loan. The student loan, this is not based on credit. This is not based on a credit check or do you have a job and all that. That's the old-timey student loan that I had, maybe you guys had. Just you're going to get it in the student's name, not a credit check, the student's loan. So you might be looking at up to $5,000 there where the student can take that, often unsubsidized. For those that are the lowest income, it's subsidized where the interest on that loan will be paid by the government while the student is in school and they don't have to pay that interest and it doesn't grow. But even if it's unsubsidized, that is really the first step. You go there, you take the student loan, and sometimes that gets the student home. So they have the other grants, the other aid, they take on their student loan, that's theirs. They get across the finish line, but just know repayment is coming down the road. And that's really square one. That's always where we start. But then after that, you have the federal parent loan, the PLUS loan, the parent loan for undergraduate studies. So the parent loan, now right now it's just below 9% with a 4.2% fee. Okay, so the federal parent loan has been a real popular loan, and more of these over time have been taken because the cap on that isn't 5,000. The cap on that has been cost of attendance minus other aid, COA minus other aid. So let's say the school costs 50, other aid is 20. That parent loan could be $30,000. And we talk all the time at our events, 7, 8 locations across the state every night. And we'll talk to a family. We're like, okay, looking at the plan you've laid out here, it looks like about $30,000 needed. And we have families every night. Family says, okay, good. And we're like, are you okay? They're like, yep. And they just take that loan and they're fine. We have other families that are like, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. And so we see the broad spectrum every night across the state, and nothing surprises us. It's a family decision, but that parent loan has been a real big deal. Well, next year, as we get past July 1st, the parent loan is going to have a cap. So the parent loan is only going to be able to be taken up to $20,500. And that's where that cap is going to kick in of what can be taken on that parent loan. And so now private loans are going to be more in the mix here. Okay. Now, in addition to that, even before the cap on the parent loan, private loans are out there and available. Okay. But as I said, right this year, the PLUS loan is 9% with a 4.2% origination fee. Private loans, okay, almost always don't have a fee anymore. That's been gone for many, many years, and it's based on credit. So here's the interesting part there. You'll see these advertised for as low as 2.73% and as high as 17.9. So if Joe and Eddie are asking me, so what do you think about a private loan? I'm going to say to you as me, I'm going to say, I don't know, what's the rate? Hey, Bill, we're going to go out for a burger. Are you going to pay for it? I don't know. What's the burger cost? If it's $2, I'm totally in. Let's go, guys. I'm treating. If it's $83 for the burger, I have a whole different thought on that.
Come on, Bill.
Come
No,
on.
even if it's good.
You're only going to take us to White Castle? Come on, Bill.
I work for a not-for-profit. Although I got a coupon on my app. I have an app for one of those fast food places, and I can get $2 hamburgers. But anyway, it's the rate. It's that rate that makes all the difference. And so my thought about taking the parent loan, when someone tells me the rate is 16% on a private loan, I'm much more okay with the parent loan when the rate is 16% on the private loan. But sometimes you can get the private loans for 5 or 6% with no fee. And at that point, I personally would be open to the private loan. So again, generically, it's one thing, but you need those details.
That was so helpful. Thank you for going through that. I think that was where I was really hoping. I think it's going to help a lot of families to hear that and understand that. You did a great job. And again, I think that's one of the things that gives me the most confidence is that I hear you explain this and you explain it in such a way that's easily to digest. And I know that that's all of your teammates, right? That's everybody that's with that organization. And so that just goes again to the need and to why Eddie said, "Hey, we need to have Bill on this podcast."
Yeah, no question. And every time I hear a Parent Plus loan, early in my career, I worked in financial aid, Bill, at a university, and I don't know if either one of you all have ever been asked a question that you thought the answer was so obvious that it made you question what you knew. I once had a parent call me. They're like, "Hey, that Parent Plus loan, is that a loan or is that a grant?" And I remember thinking, I was sitting there in the call center as a young graduate student. I'm like, "Wait a minute. I, I'm 99.9999% sure it is a loan, but why would she even ask that?" And I had to like think for a sec. I'm like, "No, ma'am, that is a loan, and you do have to pay it back." But yeah, and Joe, to speak to, and Bill, I'm interested. When you hire your team, we all go into different establishments or different businesses where there's a clear culture and there is a not cookie cutter, but like, yeah, that person that they work for that company, right? And I feel like you all have done a good job with that because every single InvestEd rep I have, they're phenomenal. So talk to me a little bit about the recruitment. Is there something to it, or you all just have like the magic sauce or something?
So years and years ago, so we would only hire financial aid experts because we needed financial aid experts. As we've talked about here on this discussion so far, these are really complicated issues. And what we had to provide was expertise. And like I said, 2003, March of 2003, I have a notebook in the back of the room and have a question on everything. And I was so lucky to meet Bob Zellers from Ball State. And then I made other friends along the way with some of our other wonderful financial aid folks here in Indiana. And Bob agreed to help me with all my questions. And so every day I'd call him with a new 13 questions. And I had to keep asking all these questions because we had to have the answers. And the part that was always so funny was I'd get done at the end of the night, and early on, a family would ask me a question, and I would say, "Well, that's good. Yeah, we got to find that out." And they'd be like, "What?" I'm like, "I don't know the answer. Like, I got to find that out, but I'll call you in the morning." And every family was like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Like, they were fine with it. So I would call Bob, and then I would call them. I'd say, "Hey, you remember me from yesterday?" They're like, "Yeah, you actually called back." I'm like, "Well, I got the answer now." And so we would go along like that, and everybody was just so happy to get the answer. So we went along, we would only hire financial aid experts. And as the team kept growing, it was getting harder and harder to get the financial aid experts from the different colleges to come work, and we needed more people. And overnight, it hit us that we needed teachers. We could take teachers and teach them financial aid. And that was the key. You needed the teacher's heart. You needed that mentality. And so not all, but most of our team is teachers, former teachers. And they came, and as long as they were willing to travel, and as long as they were willing to not work with the same cohort of 30 for the whole year, they were going to get a new 30 or a new 50 or a new 60 every night, have a new stage, a new platform, and they were able to go from go. And so what we do is we teach financial aid to teachers and presenters. And that is literally the secret sauce of what we do. And then finally, and every one of our team can tell you, and I'm sure they have, the training is ongoing. And when new folks join the enterprise, they come in and say, "Well, are you just going to throw me out there?" And we're like, "Oh, no, we're not going to throw you out there. You're going to be begging us to not have the chaperone with you until you can do that presentation night after night after night after night." And that's the secret sauce. They're
I
amazing.
love it.
This makes total sense now. This makes total sense. And I want you to know with the training, what I envision, Bill, is that like this group of teachers pull up in a school bus and then you have like a drill instructor hat on and you're doing like the get off my bus and then they're standing at the position of attention. And if they don't know the Parent Plus loan, they're doing 25 push-ups. Is that kind of what the training is like?
Well, you know, again, you guys are great because I have so many funny stories, but let me just give you this one. So when we hire and we go through the process and we talk to folks and all that, we tell them, by the way, it is the opposite. You are not going to be thrown to the wolves. You are not going to School X, which we've known for 17 years, and we're not going to have our reputation destroyed just because you're not ready. You're going to keep going, and you're going to keep going with the veteran, and you're going to keep going. You're going to learn. We promise. We tell them that, but we say in the interview process, and anybody who's applying to us and wants to be the next member on our team, I'm going to give you a secret. I'm going to give you the answer before you even asked for it. But we say, are you open to coaching? Because our team. Our team is not shy about coaching. We're not going to have mistakes put out there or wrong information. And our team. And so that's the coaches, and they work with the newer members on how to do this, how to do that, how to do better. And one of my favorite stories, before the new worker, the new team member goes to a school for the first time, they present to the rest of the team, which is growing, by the way, right? It keeps growing. So they present, we used to call it in the kitchen, but now we have a room for it, a whole room with the screens and all that. And they give the presentation. And afterwards, the team shares in a polite way, hey, think about this. Hey, consider this and whatever. And again, we have teachers. We hired teachers. And these are really talented folks. And when they get some of this coaching about topics that they've never presented on, there's things that need to be shared. Well, I'll never forget this. One of our amazing team, you know them, Eddie. And one of our amazing team, I was in my office. They had done a 45-minute, run through. And the worker went by, and I was like, how you doing? And they came in and sat down at my desk, and I was sitting here, and I looked up. I said, everything okay? And they were like, yeah, I just need a minute. And they sat there for about 2 minutes processing. They said, I'm good. And they walked away. And by the second or third time they gave the presentation, and you know them very well. Now they're just flying and rocking. But the first time they just took a minute. They were processing all the coaching, but that's the secret sauce.
Man, I'm telling you, the culture, you're crushing it, Bill. And it makes total sense now because of the consistency with every rep that I've interacted with over the 5 or 6 years. There's absolute no drop off. And the expectation is always excellent, and it always delivers.
Well, and as you know, every event surveys from the attendees and then survey from the counselor directly to me. And that feedback is that pipeline where I get such amazing feedback from the counselor in a note saying, really good, showed up early, did this. Here's one little tidbit. Here's one little suggestion. Here's something. So you get that immediate feedback, and it can be just put into the bloodstream the next day. It's phenomenal.
Hey, Eddie, I don't know if you know this or not, but we actually have sound effects on our show now. So I'm going to go ahead and just give him one of these. Oh, I don't know. Can you hear it?
Yeah, we can hear it.
Ah, there you go. So I'll give you a little applause for that, which is awesome. I mean, I can't, I really can't thank you enough for joining us today. I feel like you're definitely going to have to come back for another episode because I feel like we just touched the surface of everything that we could talk about, and it's been such a great conversation. And so I hope that you'll kind of commit to coming back to talk to us more. We try to keep the episodes to about an hour, just because we want them to be digestible, especially when you're talking about financial aid and something that, as you said, can be just so hard hitting. So let me ask this as one of our last questions before we wrap up for the day. So what is that one piece of advice? We've got somebody listening today. They're freaking out. And so what's that one piece of advice? What can they do right now? What would you encourage them to do to kind of get their questions answered? And I hope that it has something to do with reaching out to Invested, but I'll let you answer the question.
Well, and you just stole my thunder. That is, if there's only one item, it is reaching out to our team, and our phone number is 317-715-9007, 317-715-9007. And we say this because there's so many types of questions, and this is so deep. And when families get connected up with us, they start asking a question and they go, well, how long do you have? How long? And we're like, no, there's no limit. There's no question limit. There's no call limit. There's no time limit. We need to get the right answers. We need you to get that right information, and our team will not let you down. And in all these years, nobody's been abandoned. Nobody's been ignored. Nobody's been let go by the wayside. And that was always the foundational thing of what Invested offers. That is that complete help for any Hoosier with any questions in this process, including we have friends at every single school across the state. So we can reach out by text while we're talking to someone in most cases and reach out to the actual school and say, hey, we have a very granular question here. What's the answer? And usually we get an answer while we're still talking to the family. So reach out to us and we will help you for sure.
That's awesome. Eddie, you knocked it out of the park. You had a great guest today. There's no doubt about it.
I'm telling you, InvestEd always delivers, always.
And you only got like one self promotion in. Do you want to go ahead and give your second one for the show, or you feeling good? Or
No, I landed an amazing guest. That was the second
all
one.
right. That's your second one. Okay. All right. Great. Bill,
Yeah.
thank you so much, man. We cannot thank you enough. We really appreciate your time. We're going to definitely have you back on. Thanks again for being so great to be a guest here. And thanks for all your knowledge and everything you're doing to help people. And we'll step away, take a quick break. And Eddie and I are going to come back to wrap up today's episode. But Bill, thanks again. Make sure you check Invested out and keep doing great work, man. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Bobbitt, we had another great guest. Thanks to you. Good job. That Bill was wonderful, and it was really fascinating to hear everything Invested is doing and all that they're doing to help families throughout the state.
Yeah, it's one of those resources that Hoosier families need to know about. Uh, High schools, colleges, middle schools, everybody needs to know about InvestEd because they really are doing the work, educating families, walking them through this complicated process so that it's not so complicated, clearing up these myths, clearing up these issues so that families know well before high school what resources are available to them and how they can finance their higher education.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest takeaways for me in this whole thing was that there's a number for everybody, and that not to freak out until you really do the research and really know. And you've got some trusted resources that aren't going to cost you anything out there. So make sure you're using the trusted resources that aren't trying to scam you or aren't trying to promise you anything. We know the ones out there that are trying to scam people. Invested is a nonprofit. They are reliable. They've been around for over 20 years. I mean, helping, way over 20
Yeah,
years.
40 years.
Yeah, 40 years helping people. And so I think making sure that you use the good advice that's there. I think that if there's anything you can take away is to give them a call and have a conversation with them about any questions you have regarding financing college. And the earlier you do it, the better. I just think that this is going to be a resource that I'm going to continue to promote too. And I need to, we're going to have him back. He's definitely going to be on a future show. But one of the questions we didn't have time to dive into is how can universities and colleges work with Invested to continue to help in that regard? Because I think there's a lot that we could potentially partner on to continue to help drive that conversation. So it'll be fascinating, and I look forward to having more conversation with them.
Yeah. No, it again, they help so many families out and the consistency, and you'll see it, Joe, once you start working a little bit more with them, maybe invite them to your institution, the consistency in every representative, it's almost like they make machines. Like it's unbelievable. And it really helps the families out.
Hey, if you like this episode, we would really appreciate it if you would like the episode, share the episode with somebody who you think can benefit from this. I think this one, more than some of even the others that we've had, could be really beneficial to a student or to a family in your life. Appreciate you doing that. Follow us on all the social media channels. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube. So wherever you can follow and like and promote that, we would greatly appreciate it. It's hard to believe we're already 9 episodes into this, and I think we've really struck a nerve. We've got more and more listeners that are listening in, and we're happy to be helping. And hopefully, we're making the college and I guess the environment a little bit more advantageous. I guess I would say to for those students who want to go to college. So I hope we're being helpful. That was always our goal, and I think we are, Eddie. So kudos to you, and thanks for joining me in this journey.
Yeah, no, it's been fun.
Well, guys, that'll do it for us. This is episode 9 of the Next Step In podcast. We will see you next time. Take care, Hoosiers.